Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a Learning and Growing webinar. The 3 alternative assessment ideas that could be used to tailor to most courses. Our presenter today is Kimberly Paul of Southeast Community College. My name is Sidra, and I'm your moderator for Hawks Learning. We will have a live Q&A session after the presentation, so please enter any questions you have into the Q&A module as we go, and we'll answer them at the end. I will now hand it over to our presenter for today.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I'm so happy to have everybody here. I would like to share some things that I have been creating over the past year and a half to kind of speak to how we want to do assessment in different ways at my institution. And I hope that it will inspire you all to maybe get some ideas to do that in your practice as well. So I'm Dr. Kimberly Paul. I work for Southeast Community College, and I have been adjuncting in full-time in higher education for 17 years, and I worked in K-12 education for 15 years before that. And so I've been doing this a while and really have a passion for education. So today I'd like to share some of the research-based ideas behind what I have planned to show you today, but also it speaks to what my school is trying to make a shift towards from standardized testing to different kinds of assessment. So I wanted to start with just giving a brief overview of pros and cons of why to use alternative assessments, and then I'll go over the 3 things that I created. One of them is a video assignment, one of them is an infographic poster, and one of them is a blog. Then I'd like to just briefly share what I learned about creating these assessments and what I needed to change in them from what I learned from my students about them, and then what the students had to say. And then I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. So just start real quickly about pros and cons and my rationale for using alternative assessments. I have found that when students have choice in what they're doing, they engage more. And so when they're encouraged to be responsible for a topic related to whatever unit or chapter that we're going over, it really invests more. They do more critical thinking. They use more research skills and writing skills, and they have a chance to be creative as well. And these kind of alternative assessments really help kids engage more. And we all have been talking in higher education lately, at least in my institution, about the motivation factor and getting kids kind of engaged in the classroom. And of course, engaged learning is one of the things that we're really pushing as well in education these days. So I found that choice is a big thing to get kind of those motors running a little bit. And I'm not arguing, and I want to preface this, I'm not saying that we should just replace alternative assessments for all assessment, because I'm not saying that at all. There is a time and a place for our traditional assessments, and I think that those are valuable. But I also argue that maybe there's other ways to bring alternatives in to kind of balance that out. And so engagement, investment, creativity are all good ways to implement into these alternative assessments. So when we think about standardized testing, that's traditional, it really focuses more on the rote memory, comprehension, specific concepts, topics. But alternative assessments can really facilitate more interest because of how the way that they're going to demonstrate that. And so that's why I came up with these ideas of different ways to present that information to bring out that engagement and creativity factor. So I understand that comprehensive standardized testing is quick and it's easy, it's a good measure, but we can also balance that out with some well-designed alternatives as well, just to keep things interesting for our students and how they learn. Now, when we talk about assessing learning, at least at my institution and from the research that I did, I found out that there's more of a push for this as well. So I'll be interested to hear what's going on at your colleges and institutions that you're working for. We have standardized testing looking at, they focus on memorization ideas. They may not, because of test anxiety, really reflect what a student knows. Sometimes they're not associated with real life connections, which is a problem. And sometimes they don't just, measure higher order thinking skills unless there's a specific area in that standardized test for that. And of course, as we've seen in ACT and SATs tests in the past, they were worried about culture bias and things like that. And so that's a consideration today too. Whereas if we, design a really good alternative assessment, then we can incorporate problem solving abilities, communication skills, divergent thinking, a holistic understanding of whatever topic they've chosen, and make real life connections. The other bonus that I found in this is because I incorporated technology in these assignments, it really does play to the 21st century technological skills that we want our students to have. And I was surprised that some of my students weren't as tech savvy as I assumed they were. And, that's the number one thing in education. We don't assume anything. So based on the research, here's some, and I'll have my references at the end of this if you'd like to look at what the research that I got this information from. But, based on the research, here's what we're doing. Me and you as instructors, we can really help our students clarify, understand what they're doing, giving them choice. We can see how they're learning and give them feedback. But students and peers, the way I've designed this, they have to share with peers. They really do a collaborative learning experience with this. So with doing this for a year and a half and tweaking them as I go each time, I have found that I get a lot more student engagement. I get a lot more excitement, a better attendance, and they spend more time on what they're doing. And I really feel it's because of that choice factor. They have demonstrated higher order critical thinking skills, research skills, communication and presentation skills, and they spend more time because they know that they have that investment and they have to share it, so they want it to look good and be a good product. So let me go over now and show you each of the three things, and I'll start with my video assignment. So when we go through a video assignment, and I teach all things psychology, so I teach all different types of psychology courses, and so I tailored these assignments to that. But of course, you can tailor and keep in mind, tailor these to any discipline that you want to. So the process is whatever chapter I'm in, and I don't do these for every chapter, by the way. I just kind of position them in different chapters that I feel have good topics that students would want to know more about, so that they can have choice. And I give them kind of at the beginning of the unit, we're going to be having a mini kind of alternative assessment in this chapter. So as we go through the content, please be thinking about a subject that you're kind of interested in, a topic. And then I'll give you an inspiration list. And if you haven't made a choice, that will help you. And so that's kind of the preface at the beginning of the unit. And then they have to choose. So the tool that I use for this video assignment, and I understand everybody has different technology levels and different ways that they like to do it, but in my directions, I urge them to try Screencast-O-Matic, and it's a free account for teachers and students. And if you've not tried it, I highly recommend it. I have a free account. I've never paid for the premium version, and I have made over 154 videos that are stored on their cloud, and I don't have to pay anything for them. You can organize the videos. I make short tutorial videos. I do lecture videos, and it's just a great tool. And you get 15 minutes free for each video. And I think it's longer if you do the premium version, but 15 minutes for the purposes that I use this works. And for students, it would work too. And so I provide a tutorial video on that, and YouTube has great tutorial videos on how to use this too. So if you're interested, it's there. So I'm going to divide up their direction sheet, but at the end, I have the PowerPoint presentation, the direction sheets, and all the rubrics, and I'm sharing those with you at the end of the webinar, and Sidra will tell you how to access those at the end. So for each slide, I've kind of divided up these directions. So I start with, here are some different topics you can choose. I have more topics listed, but in order to fit on the slide, I cut it. And then, so they have a topic choice, but they can also be free to choose the topic as long as it's approved by me. And after they choose their topic, then they have to think about 3 areas related to that topic that they really want to dive deep on and give foundation information on. They have to create a video. And so in order to do that, they must create some sort of a presentation, like a Google slide, PowerPoint, Prezi, whatever they want to guide their, kind of like what we're doing right now. And they have to time it, and it has to be 5 minutes long. And, you know, in the old days, I would have them do a PowerPoint presentation to share to a small group, and they would be done in 2 minutes because they hadn't done enough content, right? And so if you put a time limit on it, I found that they will have deeper content, deeper understanding, and they have to produce something that goes for at least 5 minutes or be downgraded on it. I also had to figure out a way to do this where the, you know, people who were listening needed to be engaged. And so the presenter had to not only create a video, but also create an interactive activity to do after the video was over for a deeper learning experience on the topic. And that can include different things I'll show you in the next slide. And then while they're watching the video and interacting, they have the viewers need to take notes on what they're learning. And then I provide a personal tutorial on how to use Screencast-O-Matic. And then I also provide YouTube tutorials for people who get stuck or need a little extra more time. So the activity that they had to create after the video was shown could be different things, and it depended on what topic they chose. So it could be a pre-test, post-test. It could be a mini quiz, like a game, like a Kahoot or something. It could be a game that they created themselves. It could be a short 1.5-minute YouTube clip, like on a case study, and then they would ask questions about it afterwards. But they got to be creative on that you know, interactive activity piece. And then the presentation was, they show the video, the spectators take notes on it, and they have to divide the notes up. And I have them always use groups of 4 because I found that students really, they kind of buckle under pressure if they have to show it in front of the whole class. And so I make groups of 4 at the beginning of the semester that they kind of stick with. And I found that that makes them more comfortable, and they like that familiarity and consistency. Now, I do make it a high stakes thing since it is an alternative assessment. So if they are not in class on presentation day, they can only earn up to 1/2 credit, and that's only if they met all the requirements. And so that's kind of a stiff penalty since I also weight my grades, you know, for assessments. So I give them websites that they can use for their research at the bottom of the direction sheet, and then encourage them to do their own research as well. And then this is how I assess it. So I just took a screenshot of my rubric on Canvas, and you all do rubrics, you know, the way that you like them to, you know, work for your class. I made mine on the general side so that I could do individual comments on the different elements. So I made it broad, and I based it on the content that was in the directions, how they organized it, how they presented it, and then if they did the note-taking procedure for the presentations that they watched. And, you know, I divided the points up, and then that way I can do individual comments and grade it accordingly. And so that is the first one, the Screencast-O-Matic video presentation. The second alternative assessment that I created, it was something called an infographic, which is like a poster. And for this tool, I recommend them doing Venngage, but I also used Visme before, and both of them are comparable. There are also free and paid versions. They can do a free version just as easy as a paid version, and so there's no need to pay. Teachers and students can have this, and it just, you know, they have different things on that website as well. Infographic has a bunch of templates on there, so they get to pick the template that they want to use. And that gives them that freedom of creativity as well. So the direction sheet for the infographic is in my States of Consciousness chapter, because there's a lot of interesting topics in that chapter that they could decide to do a poster on. Again, there's a high stakes if it's only 1/2 credit if they can't come or present that day. And an infographic is more like a poster. And I provide a tutorial video on what that is and how to use it specifically with Venngage that I found on YouTube. And then I give them a link to the site on the direction sheet for them to make their free account. Now, I also kind of for Screencast-O-Matic and this Vengage for the infographic, I kind of have them do those accounts in class so I can troubleshoot if they have issues, but that's something that you could decide. That's just kind of an extra thing. And to share the infographic, I will talk about some problems that I came up with that, but I also fixed that by giving a little tutorial video on how to share. Because they have to share a link to it. They can't, or unless they screenshot it, they can't download it or anything. So they'll make a poster based on a topic, and I have a lot more topics than this, but this is what fits on the slide. So they choose a topic. They make their infographic poster based on whatever topic. They have to have at least 4 main points, and they have to have subpoints with that as well. So it kind of, when we say infographic poster, it can also kind of look like a mind map too as well for the 4 main points with stems off of it. But then I also make them do a written expansion script. And I call it an expansion script because they have to have more details, because the 4 main points on the poster is general, right? And so I want them to show that they did research, that they, can explain those 4 main points in depth. And so they have a script with them as they are presenting the poster so they can give that extra information. I also ask them to create 2 discussion questions that they will ask at the end of their presentation, and that is based on whatever the topic they were, and they have to be asked in class, and the group members will take notes on what they've learned during each infographic presentation. And they also have to write the 2 questions that the presenter asks, and they have to answer them in writing before they move to the next presenter. And that's just keeping everybody accountable for their attention and learning. So the directions for the presentation is kind of what I just went over, right? They write their name. I do give them the opportunity to either handwrite their notes on paper and give me that paper in class before they leave, or they can type them and then just upload them to the Canvas assignment before they leave. And I'm easy with that either way. So they are writing as they're watching. And then the rubric that I use to grade this infographic looks like this. Again, I went general so that I can give individual comments for each of my elements that are on the direction sheet. So the main points were the topic clarity, the design layout of their infographic, and then their details on how they supported the topic with the infographic itself, as well as the expansion script. And then did they have the questions that they were supposed to? And then they get graded on their note-taking of the other presenters. And that's the infographic. The last thing is the blog. And I know that in psychology, and I'm sure in other disciplines that you all are teaching, we require research papers, and I do as well. But we also have been finding, at least where I live, that students are not writing as much as they should be writing, and especially getting that not only creative writing, but also being able to put things in an academic voice. And so we do that with our research papers, our APA citations, and all of that. But to get them writing more in a way that they're used to reading, I also offer a blog alternative. And for this one, I embedded a blog template within my direction sheet that you can get at the end of this. And I basically, because social psychology has so many topics that kids are really always interested in, and these are just a few that they could choose from, that's kind of seems like a natural thing to do, is to write a blog on one of these because they can get more in-depth information from it. So I provided them with a blog example on the link that you see here, and that was basically about serial killers. And they kind of get a feel for what it should look like. And so examples are always important to share. And they pick a topic, and then they can decide either to go and talk about it in breadth or in general, or to focus. So for example, if they wanted to do serial killers, they could talk about serial killers in general, like types, or they could focus in on one, like Night Stalker or Ted Bundy or whoever they were interested in. And the length has to be the same no matter what, which I put as 800 words minimum. They have to have 5 talking points, and then they had to prepare a question to ask the group after the group had read their blog. So the criteria is they have to have empirical research that they provide, and I give them sites that are reputable for my discipline, and then tell them to be good consumers, if they're doing other research beyond what I provide. And they will have to have originality, effort in the research process. They have to have at least 3 sources, but they can have more. And it does need to be in an APA formal bibliography at the end. The blog components have to have a catchy title. It has to be formatted. It should include some pictures. The length was the minimum of 800 words or more. And then they had to write according to whoever they thought their audience was going to be, which would be based on their topic. On the presentation day, then they would either bring hard copies of the blog that they wrote, or what I found students did is just they emailed their group with an attachment of their blog, and in class they read the blog, and then they recorded notes on 3 main points of their learning that they got out of it, and then a summary paragraph of the biggest takeaway that they had learned from that blog. And then they submit those notes to me either on Canvas or with a handwritten note before they leave. So the direction sheet was built in step by step on that, and you can get that at the end. And this was my rubric. Again, I went general, and so I graded on the content that was in the directions, how they formatted it and laid it out based on what the criteria said in the directions, how they presented it, and if it had all the pieces in it, and then did they have the sources that were required at the end. So those were the 3 assessments that I came up with that were alternatives. And I wanted to share quickly what I learned from these. So I found out that students need more technology help than I expected, which is why I changed it and had them create those free accounts in class with me so I could help troubleshoot. And then I also had to make tutorial videos and find other tutorial videos to help them, because some people have Mac devices, some people have regular PC devices, some people have phones. And so it became kind of we have to figure out what the best way to work is. And of course, I'm sure your institutions have computer labs, and that became a big important element to have as a resource as well. Students also need to understand ahead of time when we say, okay, you're going to be doing this assignment, that it is considered an assessment, because students have been programmed into the traditional multiple choice kind of, essay writing thing. And when you kind of explain to them ahead of time that this is going to count as an assessment, you do need to invest in it. And this does show your learning and gives you power of choice, that they really understand, yes, I'm interested in this and I want to do a good job on it. And then we also are able that way as well to encourage students to invest and oversee in their learning and take responsibility for that, right? And that takes time management and investment and motivation, as well as engagement in what they're doing. So I just wanted to maybe point out a few things before I hear from you all, what you had to say about things to consider for your classes. As you know, you can tailor these ideas as just an inspirational piece if you're interested. It was just something that worked for me. Of course, point values are arbitrary and fluid, and you can make those worth whatever you want them to be, as well as the rubrics. They can be changed to be point by point or more broad, like the approach that I took. And how you use them with the directions and the criteria will also be fluid based on whatever your subject matter and grade levels are. So if you're interested in getting the materials that I just showed you, I did make a PDF of this PowerPoint that you can access. I also have rubrics and direction sheets for each of the 3 alternative assessments that I gave today. And so you are welcome to take as many as or all of those that you want. And my references for my presentation are here. And I just wanted to say thanks for coming. And if I can answer any questions, I'd be happy to do that right now.
So we have one so far. Have you used any of these in an online class?
I'm actually piloting them in online classes this semester for the first time. I really wanted to get the bugs out on my face-to-face, and then I felt like I could do a better job of, kind of transitioning into the online. So I can't tell you yet how that's going, but I like the way that they're set up online. And yes, they can be versatile to be online. And that's a great question.
What would you suggest would be the best way to tailor them to be online?
You can still do the video, and then they can share the video in the discussion, and then have them still do the notes and everything within the discussion as they do with their responses. I usually have 2 responses that are required. So for my video project, I make them watch 2 videos out of the whole class, and they get to pick which those 2s are. And then they still follow the presentation procedure, like with the face-to-face class, with the 2 responses that they have to do. And so that's one way to do the video one. And you can do that the same with all of them, actually. I don't know how you guys like to do online, but I typically require 2 responses. And so doing these projects, they would have a choice. And that also means that they have to look at more than one to decide what they're going to respond to. And so that encourages more learning as well.
That's awesome. Is it difficult to keep the class together and on track when students can choose different assignments?
Um, So, okay, I think I understand what you're asking. So the way that I set up my psychology classes, and this is just from like 27 years of teaching, so it works for me and it might not work for you. So please don't just say that I'm the end all be all here. But I always start my semesters with groups of 4, and they become what I call a family. And I learned that at a diversity training years ago that I went to. And when you create a community of a quote unquote family, they get very close to each other and they start relying on each other. And I found that they create study groups and everything. So when I assign one of these assignments, everybody in the class is going to do the video project. But within that group of 4, each person has to reserve a different topic so that they are learning about different things in that group of 4 on presentation day. Does that make sense?
I believe so. Will student teams share their video link with the rest of the class so those that are absent on other teams' presentation day, they can watch the video?
Yes, when I have had some people who have had to be gone on presentation day, and they have actually organized their own remote Zoom so that they can be there virtually, and then they still don't, get penalized, and they share their links via that way. And then people who don't have an excused absence can still get some credit, but they can't get entire credit, but their family will supply links to them if they want to see the videos anyway.
Perfect.
And I see Yelena says, how can we get all these materials? Sidra's going to tell you at the end where to access those on the media link.
Yep. Are there any remaining questions while I give you guys a few minutes to type them out? All right. Have you noticed a difference in the benefits of your assignments in the learning and presentation or participation of under... Oh, wait, where did my question go? Sorry. Have you noticed a difference in the benefits of your assignments in the learning and participation of underrepresented students in your class?
Underrepresented students,
Yes.
like diversity. Yeah, I have found, and we are becoming more diverse at my school than ever before. So that's a great question that I have been noticing. Those students typically need a little bit more one-on-one. And so I always encourage them to come during my office hours for extra help. But I've also found when I make those groups of 4 that they end up helping each other, and they help each other outside of class too. But I'm always available for personal Zooms and for additional help. But they really are invested because I have found when they have those small groups, they don't want to let each other down. And so they really, I see more of an investment, more better attendance, and more engagement because they feel like they're letting each other down if they're not there. And so that was kind of a boon byproduct of doing some of these alternatives too. I'm not saying it always works, but in general, I've noticed that benefit, and it's been a good one.
Thank you. It might be a little bit difficult to adapt to math, but do you have any suggestions?
For math, oh, well, I mean, you have to do so many different problem styles, right? And so it would maybe think of a way that they pick a topic that they're comfortable doing, like a certain approach to a math problem, and that might help somebody else who's not as proficient, as doing that and showing how they do their procedure. Because we all know with scaffolding and the whole Levi-Vygotsky and the peer interaction teaching, zone of proximal development, that students, they know shortcuts on how to solve problems quicker than sometimes we as instructors can do. And their way of presenting it and explaining it can really make the light bulb go off. So if they, depending on what kind of an approach that you're doing in math, it could, really be an interesting topic if you could find a way of how they could pick a different element or a different way of solving a certain problem. And it could be like shortened as well.
I think that could be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, do you have any closing remarks?
I was just excited to share with you all. I'm so proud and happy that you visited today and was here for it. I hope that you found some inspiration or at least some ideas that might work for you. And please let me know if you need further information. I'm happy to give it to you.
Awesome. There's one last comment
Okay.
that someone uses WordPress for online students to post their blogs.
Oh yeah, and that's a great thing. And that's another thing that came to mind. They don't have to use like certain things that I tell them to use. If they're more comfortable, using a different program to do things, for all the assignments. Like they don't want to use Screencast-O-Matic, or they can use different things that they're comfortable with, and you can be very lenient about that as long as they get the assignment done. But you got to provide some direction. So that's how I did mine.
Absolutely.
Oh, great, Tanya. I'm glad you're designing some new projects. That's cool.
Jay Jones, we will be sharing all resources via the recordings page. So keep an eye out for that as well. All right. If there are no other questions, thank you, Kimberly, and thank you all for attending today. If you or any of your fellow instructors are interested in presenting for our Learning and Growing webinar series, please submit your proposal to the Learning and Growing website, which I'm going to go ahead and link in the chat right now for easy reference.
And I'll give my email if you guys need it and you want, had other questions that you would like answered after the fact, you can contact me here and I'm happy to answer them for you.
Perfect. Like I mentioned before, we will be emailing you the resources mentioned today, as well as a link to the recording of this webinar once it's available. The resources will also be available on the recordings page for easy reference. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Bye. Thanks.